New at 10, a bill went before the Minnesota House last week aimed at keeping ICE agents out of schools. However, that bill failed after every Republican voted against it, including those representing the Northland. And Northern News Now's Ella Schoberl heard from one of those no-vote Republicans today. Ella, ICE remains a big topic of discussion here in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, that's right, Dan. That bill was co-authored by Duluth DFL Representative Pete Johnson. He tells me he was shocked to see that no GOP reps crossed the aisle to support it. The reversal of special protections at schools and other locations by the Trump administration has led many to leap into action in the wake of Operation Metro Surge. Late last week, a bill that would limit ICE access in Minnesota schools failed in a tie vote in the House. The bill would have required a judicial warrant for agents, a written statement of purpose, and approval from the district superintendent.
The importance is in the outcomes of it and making sure that when kids are going to school and teachers and everybody else, when they're in that space, they feel safe.
Representative Pete Johnson, a co-author of the bill, said he was frustrated by the lack of bipartisan support. But members on the other side of the aisle say the legislation only served as a definition of where federal agents can go on school grounds.
This bill really isn't solving a problem like lowering property taxes or lowering the car tab fees.
Republican Representative Natalie Zalesnikar, who represents a large portion of northeast Minnesota in the state house, also noted concern around the bill's wording, saying it implies school superintendents can veto a judicial warrant. In a statement on the failed vote, Duluth Superintendent John Magus said the district was disappointed, saying it was a loss of critical protection for students. The school district joined a lawsuit last month to restore those previous federal protections.
Superintendent John Magus even saying that, when people are feeling scared, they can't learn. So I guess what's your response to that when it comes to the conversations around this bill?
I mean, we saw fear during COVID too. People were scared, but the reality is I'm not aware of one situation where federal agents went inside a school.
Meanwhile, Johnson calls the failed vote a result of partisanship.
It's frustrating when politics come in on something like that shouldn't be that political.
Both sides say they're willing to continue conversations on this bill and find common ground for school safety. Live in studio, Ella Schoberl, Northern News Now.